It is not that no higher intelligence cares about you. It is that a fragmented mind does not transmit. Noise does not cross thresholds. Static does not pass the firewall. You call it distraction. Ancient Hermetic traditions framed it as bondage. Modern language calls it attention capture. Different words. Same prison. Your awareness is pulled through feeds, fears, unfinished conversations, imagined futures, old humiliations, manufactured urgency. The signal fractures before it stabilizes. And then you wonder why you feel spiritually blind inside a world that never stops screaming for your bandwidth. You know the symptom. Not the theory. The symptom. That pressure behind your sternum when a message hits your phone. The jaw locking before the argument even starts. The pulse spike when you open the bank app. The strange half-second at 3 a.m. when your body is tense, your thoughts are moving, but something in you is not moving at all. Something cold. Clear. Silent. It notices the panic without becoming the panic. It notices the thought without obeying the thought. That is not random self-talk. That is the first system notification. A glitch in the identity loop. A brief emergence of witness consciousness. And the architecture built around you does not want that gap to widen. The enemy is not one villain in one room. It is an operating system. Attention-Fragmentation Architecture. Social media engineered for compulsion. Fear loops sold as news. Identity narratives reinforced until you confuse your reactions for your essence. Ancient traditions warned that external authority can sever direct perception. Modern systems industrialize that severance. They do not need to destroy your soul. They only need to keep your awareness busy, inflamed, and externally hooked so coherence never stabilizes. Because if coherence stabilizes, something changes. Traditional contemplative systems taught that there is a threshold event. A precise split in experience. Stimulus appears. Reaction begins to assemble. But awareness does not fully collapse into the reaction. A gap opens. Brief at first. Almost microscopic. That gap is the forbidden key. Not belief. Not ritual performance. Not personality. A threshold. A signal event. And the exact method for extending it was treated as initiatic technology, not public entertainment. If this lands in your body before it lands in your intellect, you are already close to the seam in the construct. Ordinary curiosity does not feel like this. Ordinary curiosity does not make the chest tighten and then release. Ordinary curiosity does not make you remember moments when the world kept moving but something in you stepped back and watched your own anger assemble like code compiling in real time. If you recognize that, you are not searching for a philosophy. You are detecting the difference between mental content and the field that perceives it. And that difference is where the observers enter the file. Not as judges. Not as saviors. Not as cosmic parents. As witnesses to coherence. Most people imagine spiritual surveillance the wrong way. They imagine a celestial bureaucracy tracking sins, prayers, loyalty, performance. The older Hermetic model moves differently. In that model, what matters is not the content of your story, but the stability of the awareness running beneath it. Not your speech. Your signal quality. Not your posture. Your coherence. That is the first reversal. The observers are not listening for your words. They are registering whether your consciousness remains fused to every impulse, or whether it begins to hold form beneath the storm. And that makes this much more dangerous than religion ever admitted. Because a system can tolerate belief. It can monetize belief. It can weaponize belief. What it cannot easily control is a human being who notices the machinery of reaction without instantly feeding it. So hold that question. If there is a threshold where awareness becomes coherent enough to be detected, what exactly changes in the body, in the mind, in the field? What is the mechanism of that gap? And why do so many traditions preserve the same pattern without giving the full method to the crowd? The archive opens in darkness. Not metaphorical darkness. Temple darkness. Oil flame against black stone. Ink pressed into papyrus. Star charts unrolled under a desert sky that gives no comfort and no illusion. In the Hermetic imagination, Egypt is not a museum. It is a laboratory. Initiates do not enter to ask for blessings. They enter to learn how perception can be refined until the soul stops lying to itself. Ancient Hermetic practitioners taught that the human problem is misidentification. You do not suffer only because life is difficult. You suffer because awareness fuses with every moving form inside the inner chamber. A thought rises, and you become the thought. A fear rises, and you become the fear. A memory rises, and you become the wound again. This fusion is the lock. The witness is the hidden instrument designed to pick it. Comparative traditions preserve related patterns. Unverified as historical identity, but valid as comparative motif. In Enochian material, in Gnostic reflections, in Vedantic teaching, in Tibetan contemplative language, a recurring archetype appears: the witness, the recorder, the non-grasping awareness that sees without interference. These are not identical systems. It is cleaner to say they preserve a recurring structure rather than one uniform doctrine. But the pattern is difficult to ignore. Again and again, the deepest teachings shift attention away from appeasing external powers and toward refining the one faculty that can observe experience without drowning in it. That is why the observer motif matters. Not because celestial beings are spying on your private life. Not because the universe is obsessed with your biography. But because multiple traditions point toward a threshold where awareness recognizes itself. The event is not conversational. It is not usually theatrical. Traditional teaching describes something far more severe. Recognition. A moment where the observing function ceases to be a theory and becomes immediate. Awareness sees thought, sensation, memory, fear, and role as passing constructs. For one impossible second, the machinery is visible from outside the machinery. And in many esoteric models, that moment is what is registered. If we model the old language through a technical frame, the so-called observers function like archivists of resonance. Not moral police. Not emotional babysitters. More like non-interfering recorders of pattern stability. This is not a scientific claim about literal entities. It is a useful esoteric model drawn from traditional witness frameworks and later metaphysical interpretations. In that model, what is recognized is not your personality, but the degree to which consciousness has defragmented from reactivity and stabilized into a cleaner carrier wave. That is why worship misses the mechanism. That is why begging misses the mechanism. That is why constant channeling culture often misses the mechanism. The old schools were harsher than that. They demanded discipline. Silence. Observation. Repetition. The initiate was not trained to perform holiness. The initiate was trained to detect inner motion before identification completed. To catch anger as heat before it became narrative. To catch fear as contraction before it became obedience. To catch desire as voltage before it became command. This is not decorative spirituality. It is precision work. And then the drift began. Traditional disciplines of self-observation weaken when authority externalizes salvation.